Morning, everybody. I'll have to go ahead and call this meeting to order for the Denton County Transportation Authority Board of Directors regular meeting for July the 23rd, 2026, here at 10 a.m. At this time, if you'll please stand, we'll have Paul is going to lead us in our invocations and our Pledge of Allegiance. Proceed with the meeting.
If you would bow your heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day and the goodness of your creation that allows us to meet here and consider the business of the Denton County Transportation Authority. Your word says we are to seek the well-being of the cities in which you've placed us and the places in which you've placed us. And so we thank you for the opportunity to do so. Pray that you'd be with the men and women here, our customers, our visitors, be with the family of our fallen soldier who came home just yesterday. Lord, we thank you for her sacrifice and the sacrifice of so many men and women around the world in service to our nation. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
All right. Thank you, Paul. All right. Do we have any special introductions of anyone that we need to make of note?
No, sir, not today.
All right. Do we have anyone registered for public comments? Is there anyone? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and proceed forward. All right. Members, are there any items you'd like to pull off the consent agenda, or do we have a motion to approve it as presented?
Motion to approve as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? And a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Our consent agenda today consists of item 1, consider approval of the regular meeting minutes dated June the 25th, 2026. Item 2 is consider approval of the monthly financial statements for May 31st, 2026. Item 3, consider authorizing the chief executive officer to execute a construction contract with Kevco Electrical Construction Incorporated for underground electrical vault, rewiring, hardwired sump pump installation and generator system assessment, and rewiring at the bus operations and maintenance facility in an amount not to exceed $124,000. And 4, consider authorizing the chief executive officer to negotiate and execute amendment number 7 to the current interlocal agreement of the ILA with the city of Coppell in an amount not to exceed $370,522 for taxi services in support of the City of Coppell Workforce Transit Program through September the 30th, 2028. Next is proceed to our regular agenda, item 1, which is discuss the updates of the proposed fiscal year 2027 operating and capital budget, and reserve policies and long-range financial plan, and the draft fiscal year 2027 work plan. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll invite James Blarowitz, our Senior Manager of Budget and Grants, to start us out. We'll also have Mr. Sheriff Sibley come up to the podium, as will I, through the course of this presentation. Good morning, James.
My name is James Blarowitz. I'm the Budget and Grants, as Paul said, and welcome to our guests, Chair and Board. Today, I'll be going over with you any of the changes that we had from the June meeting, and then Paul will discuss TRIP. Derek's going to discuss long-range financial plan, and then Paul's going to come wrap us up with the work plan for our section of this meeting. So from the June meeting to the July meeting, we had just very few changes. One, we have an increase in revenue due to Coppell Lift as riderships increased by about 20%. And so we have a $75,648 increase in revenue, which directly ties to the purchase transportation. So that's 60% on top of the Coppell Lift purchase transportation, trying to get that more in line with what we're seeing in the ridership with Coppell over the trends that we're seeing for this year. In addition, for our expenses, for planning, computer software maintenance, we have an increase because we're adding in more money for Optibus. Optibus will be taking the place of Remix. And Optibus is a more efficient program for us for doing the bid packages for fixed route and UNT. So there's a $23,622 difference there. As I mentioned a second ago, the Coppell Lift purchase transportation is increasing to match the ridership and tying back to the revenue. And then in June, we had preliminary numbers for insurance, and we have our real numbers now, which represents a $99,563 increase. That's primarily due to some increases in workers' comp, auto, liability, property claims. And so we have a claim that was from 3 years ago for workers' comp that will fall off by next year. So we should not see as much of an increase next year as we saw for this year. But overall, that gives us $170,465 increase from the June budget to what we have right now in July for the proposed revised. Moving on for the operating budget, now that gives us a total of $61,323,424. That's our proposed budget. Capital remains unchanged at the $20.3 million. Debt service remains unchanged, and then the G&A to OpEx also remains unchanged at 18.5%. So the overall difference again between the two, the number you see here, the number 4 is just that $170,000. Here you'll see the change in net position without depreciation, and I'll show it with depreciation. But as a whole, we have revenues of $81,114,796. OpEx is a $61.3 million. You saw it before. And then it's a 69% increase on top of the working budget. And as a reminder, that really almost all ties back to increased purchase transportations and increased contracted services that we have for the next year. And then now you're seeing it with depreciation. The OpEx with depreciation totals $72.1 million. Capital budget we put in here just so you have it and can see it. Nothing has changed from June to July. So it remains identical, totaling the $20.3 million for capital. And now Paul will come up and speak on TRIP.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be with you. I've just got 2 slides here to talk about the TRIP program, the Transportation Reinvestment Program. You all recall that last year, or at the end of the year prior, you adopted a policy that would allow the TRIP program to be evergreen, and that is ever considered year after year as we go through the budget process, and understanding what are the agency's revenues, what are our obligations, and then what should the TRIP allocation be for the year forward. That gives you the full discretion and authority to allocate funds according to the formula that's in the policy, allocate lesser funds that's allocated than what is put into the policy, or say that there would be no funds for the given year through the policy. So last budget meeting, last month, we went through the preliminary budget workshop, and we showed you this slide that demonstrates that we've delivered what is a balanced capital and operating budget for fiscal year 2027 as proposed, with a $1.3 million surplus that's there for transit asset management and other capital projects that may come up. Below the line, not listed in this note here, is we know that we have this intermediate service plan phase 3 decision coming up. We anticipate bringing that back to you in the September timeframe, most likely. And that is the opportunity to offset GO Zone service in Denton with fixed route service that then would allow the reallocation of GO Zone service into other areas of Denton not served, and the Southern Zone loop between Louisville, Highland Village, and potential to open up other areas outside of the current boundary. I want you to keep this number in mind, because what you're going to see developed is really 3 different alternatives. And so one of your alternatives could be, if you wanted to go to a zero balance budget, you could say, well, there's $1.3 million available that could be allocated towards TRIP this year. And that could be an option for you. This slide, and I'll specifically look at scenario A over here, demonstrates how we have typically calculated the TRIP project or the TRIP budget in the past. We look at unrestricted fund balance less the TRIP monies that we've allocated, but that are unused. The bond fund reserve balance, sales tax stabilization, and that's how we get to $25.1 million from that original 112. Then that would be allocated by the 15% to the member cities, distributed by sales tax distributions. That's how you get to that $3.7 million. Alternatively, we can look at the TRIP projects or the trip policy and say, scenario A shows us what looking backwards shows. Now we see what we look like if we look forward. And looking forward, we know that we have ongoing debt service at 1.9 million. And then we have this unmet capital requirement for the A train extension at about $50 million. That's based on the briefing that Austin gave to you all last May, I believe. And so here, two different alternatives, $3.8 million or $0. So no decisions are required today, but I wanted to lay this out for you so you could see kind of how we're tracking across these, and then there's opportunity for feedback and discussion. So with that, I'll pause for questions that you might have.
Does, my apologies. Why is debt service not part of A? I'm missing that.
It was typically not it has not been in the formula in the past.
Okay,
But as we think about now, what we have new in front of us is the potential to have to borrow additional funding, to do the A train project. We said, well, we should probably also consider what we have ongoing in debt service.
so that 1.9 is to fund A train.
That's the former debt that we've taken, that we already have
Existing.
Okay,
existing, and then the $50 million unmet capital requirement is the one for the gap that we have in the current A train program.
I guess I just don't, and I'm always ignorant in spreadsheets, so bear with me. I don't understand if scenario A, this is if we allocate money this way, we end up aren't we still servicing $1.9 million worth of debt regardless? Where is that captured?
We are. It has not been in the current formula. It's a conversation that we had amongst ourselves as we were thinking about the potential of taking on additional debt.
Okay, so this is one of those things where like we weren't capturing reserve money for,
Correct.
and so we need to consider
Correct.
creating an account basically for that. Okay. Thank you for that, Paul.
If I could add, I think that's probably like you mentioned, Vice Chair, when we first started the trip program, we weren't capturing
Right.
like the depreciation of buses.
Right.
Appreciated. And I am surprised too. Why didn't we capture debt service? But yeah, here we are. Maybe that just needs to be a tweak that we probably make to the formula. So
yeah.
Anyway.
The other item that, like I said, is new, and for the first time this year, we really have focused on balancing the budget on a year-by-year basis for capital. We'd always been balancing on an operating basis. We had borrowed from reserves for a couple of years, get caught up on infrastructure items, but now we are back to a balanced budget year over year. And so the decision to expend trip capital in a given year has an impact on that balanced budget approach as well. Sure.
Any other questions as it relates to that? Okay. Yes.
Can you remind me, Paul, so if we have to finance that full $50 million gap, generally where our debt service would be, I can't remember, was it 5-7 million?
We do have that later on in the presentation. Okay. Derek is going to talk about that in the long range. What do you know the number offhand? What the additional? No. So.
It would be 12.6, but that's for just the 24.
Yeah.
That's my estimation.
Right. So this is the current existing debt. You see the bump up, and then where it goes ongoing about 1.7.
Okay, so I heard 4.6 million debt service if we do 24 million.
If
Or 24.6?
25, so it's the 1.6 million. So logically, maybe double 1.6.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'll come back to this and we'll keep moving. Derek.
Good morning. How about the long-range financial plan? One of the things that we were kind of tasked to do this year was to take what we had was a 12-year look and expand it out 20 years and trying to see what the agency looks like in fiscal year 45. So the original steps plans, what we kind of did was take the plan that was in place. There was assumptions that were built into the original long-range financial plan and really just expand those assumptions out 20 years to see what that actually looked like. We had conversations with planning department to really key into some of the capital projects that were going to go into that plan as well. And so what we have for you today is really two things as to what does that look like now? If under the current assumptions and just expanding it out 20 years, adding in the capital projects, what does that look like over the 20-year span? The second thing on that is, what are the levers that we can pull to solidify that plan over the next 20 years as well? So the plan is broken up into three sections. One is the revenue and expenditures. This is really just the operating side of things, operating expenditures, operating revenue. We have the capital expenditures and revenue, and then we look at the debt service and the fund balance. So what does the plan really look like under the original plan, under just stretching it out 20 years? Well, first of all, operations are pretty sound for a while. The healthy margins are there up until the early 2030s. After that, we kind of start dipping down to where our expenditures are more than our revenue. The story here is really our capital projects that are there. In the plan, there are $726 million of capital projects that are built in there. Plus, there's about $76 million set aside that we have for our TAM project, which is our savings that we kind of set over to the side for those capital projects. And so there's really a gap of about $152 million in the near term that we will have to try to figure out what to do with and how to fund those things. Debt capacity, as we've kind of talked about already, our existing bonds expire in fiscal year 32. And in the plan is built one debt issuance of $24.6 million in fiscal year 28. And that was the original best. That was the best option that we had in the A-Train expansion. That was with getting all the grant programs. As you all know, we did not get to build grant. So we're still looking through the plan and what that's going to look like when we start figuring out all the funding for that project. But in the current plan, it's only a $24.6 million issuance in fiscal year 20. And then your net available fund balance stays positive really through fiscal year 2023. So we really have kind of an 8-year runway before some of the pressures really start to get on the agency. These are just the assumptions that were originally built into the plan. This is the assumptions that were in there for last year's long-range financial plan. You see your revenue growth, your sales tax revenue was built in at 2 to 2.5% growth, contracted services 3.5 to 4.25, operating grants at 2%, and this is year over year. Passenger revenue 1 to 2%, investment income, other non-operating revenue pieces. And then the expense escalators are also built in there with your salary and wages and your purchase transportation both growing at 4% year over year. And then the other items were growing at 2% year over year. And so what does that trajectory look like in 20 years? If we continue down that road under those assumptions, what is it going to look like in fiscal year 45? So our peak balance in this, in our net available fund balance, and I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth a little bit between what our net available fund balance and our operating. And understanding that our net available fund balance is everything that comes in the door, everything that goes out the door, all expenditures. It doesn't matter if it's operating, capital, debt, it's all that. It also includes our reserves that are in there. It also includes the trip liabilities. It also includes our depreciation, all those things. Bottom line, this is what it is. Okay. So our net available fund balance, the peak of that is in fiscal year 28 at $73.8 million. That is the year that we go out and according to plan and get that $24.6 million bond issuance. That's why we see that increase there. We stay positive in this through 2033. We turn negative in 2034. So this graph, the green area is your net available fund balance. You can see that it dips below the line in fiscal year 34. The black line is your cash and investments that you have on hand. You can see even after our net available balance dips below the line, our cash balance does stretch out a couple more years beyond that. And then the gap between the two is really our required reserves and our trip liability that we have. In that plan is the capital projects. Like I said, this is what is really kind of driving that line going below zero. So in this graph, I have identified a couple things here. First of all, in the dark navy lines is the large investment capital projects. The yellow is our minor, what we call minor projects. So your major projects are really like your fleet purchases, your expansions, the A-train, the TOD, those sorts of things. The minor projects are things like, lighting at BOM or rail or a bus wash or, smaller capital projects that are there. You can see by this graph that a majority of our capital projects are those large capital major projects that we have in the plan. And a bulk of those fall within the window between fiscal year 28 and fiscal year 36. And then the green lines just represent the sources, identified sources to help pay for those projects. In other words, for most of your major projects, that's going to equate out to your federal grants. Now, in our near-term gap, we have a $152 million gap. What that means is, here's our projects. We have identified sources, which are typically our federal grants. There's a gap between the two of those. That's a $152 million near-term gap. The long-term gap is $71 million. Look at our debt service that we've already kind of looked at. Again, that one bond issuance in 28. Our existing bonds, they retire in 32. Our peak balance is in $3.7 million is in fiscal year 32. And then kind of the long run on our debt service is $1.6 million per year. Again, depending on what that bond issuance ends up being.
And it bettered it out.
This is really looking at our TRIP program and where we sit in that TRIP program today. So currently, as of about 2 days ago, the outstanding liability in that plan is about $35.3 million. When I refer to the liability, I refer to the fact of here's what this board has dedicated towards to our cities minus what we've actually paid out. Okay, so that's the $35.3 million. When you originally saw the slide presentation and some of the long-term financial plan stuff, this stuff was really not solidified just yet. So there have been, a slight change here and there because of this. This graph just shows the outstanding liability throughout the next 20 years. And as you can see, it just steadily projects down to zero at the end. Yes, sir.
Is that based off city feedback on how they're going to spend that down? Or is that did we just kind of give a guesstimate on that?
That has no bearing on how the cities are going to spend it. It's what has been dedicated minus what has been paid.
Yeah.
And so there are
projection of the.
There are still some funds there that have not been dedicated to projects. For example, Louisville might have $10 million, but it really hasn't been dedicated to a project. That does.
Right, but how do we know it's going to be under 12 million in fiscal year 30 if we don't know what the buy down rate is to get it off the liability?
We put some assumptions in there.
Okay.
There are some assumptions. We do have some assumptions as to, based on the projects that are currently on the books, what do we think is going to be spent 27, 28, 29?
Okay.
And then after that, there's just some assumptions built in there. So one of the things that we started to do, knowing that the outlook was really not in favor of the agency after fiscal year 33, is what are the levers that we can pull to help try to makes to solidify the plan and solidify our operations out 20 years. And so the first thing that we started looking at was our revenue. And the first thing we looked at on that was our sales tax growth year over year. And so we really just started kind of playing with the numbers and saying, okay, what would it take in order to get us to fiscal year 45 and still have a balanced budget? Now, this graph, I want to take, this is the operating. Okay, we were talking about net available fund balance. This is just operating. This is the operating revenue minus the operating expenditures. So the different picture. So the first line that's on here is the black line, and that is the current plan. That is the current assumptions. And what does that look like? So in the operating plan, if we were just to continue out where we're at, so your blue is your operating expenses, your black, yellow, and green line are your estimated revenues. And if we were to continue with the current plan, we would get out to fiscal year 38 before our expenditures exceed our revenue. So we created option number 2, and that was just increasing that year over year increase by 0.5%. So it was 2% growth through fiscal year 33. We increased that to 2.5. What does that do? How does that look? It almost gets us out 20 years. That yellow line that you see there represents what I'm referring to as option number 2 with the tax rate increase, not increase, not a tax rate increase. It's a assumption in the year over year gain in our collections. I don't want to misspeak and think we're going to increase the tax rate. That gets us out to fiscal year 2042 on the operating side before our expenditures exceed the revenues, and bumped it up just a little bit more to a 0.75% increase year over year. And that gets us out, that's that green line, and you can see that it gets us out to 2045, where we still have a balanced budget at that time. And so,
But to be clear, I have zero control over that. That's just a spreadsheet.
correct.
Because that sales tax collections, that's going to do what it do.
That's correct. And one of the things I mentioned to Paul was when we put together a 20-year plan, it becomes really a 1-year plan.
Right.
Because we have to come back and revise it every single year. And we may say we take option 3 and we come back a year from now and we have to review what we're actually looking at.
Yeah,
Were we right? Were we wrong?
Yeah, and I know you guys think this. I just want to be able to, for the folks who might see this at some later time, understand that this is not us planning spending. This is just taking a look at what is possible, depending on what the sales tax collection environment looks like over here. Yeah. And personally, I'm probably one of the biggest instigators of why we do the current 2%. Because my experience with the city of Louisville has been that we are very conservative in our projections, because I see what happens when you get happy about these 10% tax increases and now sales tax revenue increases. And if you keep counting on them, you end up really in the hole. It swings back the other way really hard.
I think it can happen.
Yeah. So if I may, to piggyback on those comments, our journey on this long-range financial plan for our agency is 4 years in the making. First, fully loading, what do we think we need to have? Then slowly building ourselves out. Now we have a 5-year plan. We got an 8-year plan. The goal has always been 20. You all today can and going on, but today too, can give us the feedback about what you're comfortable with in the assumptions, because we have revenue levers we can pull, we have OpEx levers that we can pull, and we're trying to paint a picture that gives us a 20-year path based on the assumptions that we're all and that you all are comfortable with. So that is the work ahead of us.
Can you go back to slide 24? Okay, so the concern I have is you get to fiscal 37 and beyond, and there are no large capital projects. Is it realistic to assume that for 8 or 9 years, there aren't gonna be any large capital projects?
I'll address that.
I mean, has there ever been an 8-year period in this agency's history where there weren't?
We're still young. We're still young.
Yeah. So, again, work in progress, iterations, one at a time. We're showing a large fleet replacement program on buses, cutaways, that this year we're doing minivans instead. I think we're gonna continue to do this, and where we are able to slide things to the right because they don't have to be done, we're gonna
Well,
slide.
I'm not talking about things, I'm not talking about deferring things. I'm talking about, I mean, you've got vehicles that you're buying now that have what, a 12 to 15 year
12-year
lifespan.
useful
So
life.
they're gonna need to be replaced in that window where you have no large capital projects.
And some of our buses are considerably beyond their useful life because we maintain them really well, but we keep them up to date and refreshed with seat cushions and wraps and all that sort of thing. So likely that 5 years from now, there could very well be things that are happening in those last several years. We just can't see them right now, rather than burdening the plan with things that would be really conjecture.
I think it would be useful though, even if you took,
Okay.
let's see, this is fiscal 27 to fiscal 36. If you just took those large investments and cut them by 50% and added that to 37 and beyond,
So
to me, that would be a safer assumption of what could be lying out there, because if you had, you know, we're looking at, this is not a rosy picture that we're looking at, but it's certainly not a doom and gloom picture. But if you added 5 years of what it looks like in fiscal 34 and 35 in there somewhere, it blows this whole thing up.
Correct. There's also some projects in this that we'll talk about that are also required to be considered to make this feasible. But I think what you're saying is, if our go forward plan would be where we can avoid making investments, we do, and that's what fills in those other lines. What would a first pass at that right now look like to kind of not add to the overall capital plan, but better spread it across the
I
period?
think you have to have an assumption that there's gonna be some capital projects in there.
Let me add a little bit to, because I have some experience with this. I think what our secretary is trying to say, and you can tell me if I'm misunderstanding you, is that we made an investment in the rail in 2010. At some point, that rail wears out. You're gonna have to do a major replacement of your rail system. You're going to have buildings that we build, the deep downtown Denton Transit Center. You're gonna need to put major money into that. And that's really not shown, but that's a cycle that has to happen.
I think it's, to be blunt, I think it's whistling past the graveyard to not assume there's gonna be some large investments.
So this may have a cyclical pattern where you go 3, 4, 5, 6 years, minor stuff, and then it starts up again as stuff that was built in 2010, now at 2045 needs to have some type of major rehabilitation. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
I think that makes sense, and we can think about how to model that.
And the good thing about it is this is obviously just the first draft of the plan, and we can come back and look at it later. And so, Mayor Gilmore, to your point on being conservative, and that's a thing that I hang on to too. And one of the things I don't want to do is make assumptions that blow things out of the water that don't make any sense. And so one of the first things that I did when I tested on the sales tax increase is it still considered a conservative number? Is what we're throwing out there, does it still consider to be conservative? And so I looked at over the last 20 years, you know, what does that look like in this area as far as sales tax growth goes? And looked at the comptroller's office and said, okay, what are they anticipating the sales tax growth is going to be? Unfortunately, the comptroller does not provide a long range forecast of what that growth is going to be. They really just do a 2-year, year over year. But even in looking at that, the comptroller for 2027 has said that the statewide growth year over year would be about $3.7 million. And so, or excuse me, 3.7%. And then, so looking at this graph in comparison and trying to say, are we still being conservative? Options, the current path, obviously option 2 and option 3 all fall underneath what the comptroller said would be the average for the state in fiscal year 27.
Good question. So if we're currently projecting 2.5, or assuming 2.5 typically, I think we've been coming over projections much of the time. Remind me what we're spending that money on, the amount that we're getting in addition to what we expected.
I'm not sure I understand your
So
question.
if we, let's say if we projected $2 million more in sales tax revenue based on the 2% growth or
Mhm.
2% growth, but we come in at 3 million or something like that, for example, what are we doing with that extra million, or the money that's coming in addition to what we're projecting?
Okay, so we've estimated we'll have 2 million, we get 3 million. What do we do with that extra $1 million?
Yeah.
I mean, and that depends on year to year, you know, what the operating and the capital projects look like. I mean, because the sales tax revenue goes to both. It could pay operating expenses, it could pay capital expenses, it could pay debt service expenses. So, I mean, anything like that, if our revenue equals our expenditures, but we have that additional $1 million per se, it falls to the bottom line into our net available fund balance. Does that answer your
Yes.
question?
I think looking at page 27 and what you're asking about, Susie, is everything in that white section below FY 2038. Below the green, below the, yeah.
That's a good, yeah.
That's revenue not anticipated. Good question.
Right, and this is only the operating part. You also have the capital part.
I always like to, when we're doing these long-term projections, to kind of take a look at the 3 member cities, because they also do long-term sales tax projections. And as an agency, we should not be, well, I get that some cities are more conservative than others, but you kind of take a look at them in the aggregate. We shouldn't be way beyond what the 3 of them are doing, because it should be the same. What they collect and what we collect, on a percentage basis, should be about the same.
And I have reached out to all 3 of our member cities to gather that information, but I have not gotten it as of yet. So one of the other levers that we looked at, so we refer to option 1 here as continue the path as is, the way it was developed and has been developed over the last few years. Option 2 is what we're referring to, is what we just talked about, was that sales tax increase year over year. And then option number 3 is leaving the sales tax, leaving the revenue alone, and looking at expenditures. So reducing the growth in expenditures year over year. And what would that need to be in order for us to be balanced in the operating budget in fiscal year 45? So it's not one-sided. It's looking at the revenue. What do we need to do? Looking at the expenditures, what would we need to do? And in order for it to be balanced in fiscal year 45, we would need to reduce the expenditures by less than 0.5%, so 0.45% year over year. Reduce the growth year over year. So if we go back to our original slide that showed our salary and wages growing at 4% every year, we would have to then, it would need to grow at 3.6% year over year instead of 4%. Okay, and the same thing, you know, on our, for example, our outsourced services. They were at 2%. It would need to grow at 1.6% year over year instead of 2%. And then we looked at what is a combination of those two. So not all sales tax growth, not all cutting expenditures, but a combination of the 2 of them, and what would that actually look like? And so in order for that to work out, we looked at a combination of increasing the sales tax growth less than 0.5% to 3.75%, or 0.375% and decreasing the expenditure growth by 0.3%. And so realistically here, options 2, 3, and 4 all get you to the same place. One is just increasing revenue, one's just decreasing expenditures, and one of them is doing a combination of the two. Okay. And so this graph here shows you options 2, 3, and 4 as if the net available fund balance, again, going back to net available fund balance, if we plug those 3 options into the plan, where do they get us in the 20-year plan? And so again, the options 2, 3, and 4 are in your green line, and they get us out to fiscal year 34 as far as our net available fund balance before we go negative. And then at the end of fiscal year 45, out 20 years, it's now showing us to be at a $28 million deficit in our net available fund balance. Okay. And then I just drew a box there between 32 and 36, 37. That's where, going back to that graph that showed the capital projects, that's just kind of where those lines, where those kind of fell. And one of the things I want to point out, that black dotted line that's going through there, that represents the original plan, option number 1, with basically no changes to what we've been doing. Here's just a look at those projects, those capital projects again, and what total they are. So overall, in that plan, there's $726 million worth of capital projects. Over on the right-hand side, we have some of those larger investment items that we talked about before and what those were. Also in the plan is that $76 million in reserves that we've set to the side. Okay. And so we're looking again, just playing with the numbers. What do we need to do to see if we can't get this out to 45 and be balanced in our net available fund balance? And so the thing that we looked at is on those 2 bottom projects, the A-Train 15-minute frequency at $190 million and the rail fleet replacement at $138 million. Those both equal about $328 million. Now, what would it look like if those 2 projects did not come to fruition? And then how would that play out into the plan? Now, understanding that that's $328 million in expenditures, but that also comes with $262 million in revenue because there's federal grants that would be tied to those projects. So you don't just cut out the expenditure, you also cut out $262 million in revenue. So really the only real savings there is about $66 million, which is the gap there.
Talk to me just briefly on this slide. Everything except that 15-minute frequency is a capital one-time expense. 15-minute frequency is this 190 million in capital equipment requirements to get to that level?
That is correct.
That's all the double tracking, and so that has nothing to do with the increased payroll that comes on board with that.
I believe that in the long, we'll go back and confirm this when we bring this back to you. In the long range financial plan, I recall that we calculated the number of what the increased operating cost year over year is to run 15-minute frequencies on the A-Train.
Mm-hmm.
And that in previous versions of the long range financial plan, we had put that into the operating number.
Okay.
And so this is just the one
This
time.
is the one time.
number.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And to comment on the grant revenues, we recall in the last version of the long range financial plan, we were assuming successful efforts in winning federal discretionary grants to help us cover 80% of these project costs. And so that's what Derek's talking about with.
It's 80% of the project.
Right. We're wiping out 300+ million in capital expense, but we only really net effect 60 million plus because of the grant considerations.
So the rail fleet replacement, is that not? We have to do that at some point, right? We just can't. They were just not gonna do it, right?
We do, and we're trying to see what levers have to be pulled to make this long range financial plan balance. The other thing that needs to happen in this conversation is we're farther now than we've ever been on our A-Train design work to get to downtown Carrollton and the 15-minute frequency project. Between now and the next time, we're going to reconcile these numbers with what's coming together in those estimates. It might move it a little bit. It's not going to move it. It's not going to move it enough to solve the long-range financial plan problem, but this is giving us a flashing signal that says, hey, in the mid-30s, when we're looking at replacing rail fleet, that could have a negative impact on our long-range financial picture. So when we get ready to publish the long-range financial plan, you all can tell us, do you want to make the assumption that rail fleet is taken off of the long-range financial plan, or do you want to keep it in there? And then we have not at that point achieved a 20-year long-range financial plan. We've achieved something between 10 and 20 years, which is still a step forward.
But we do have to replace. And it doesn't seem like that's an option or a choice to not replace the rail fleet.
Correct. We will have to replace it. And so, again, we were trying to understand what would it take to get to a 20-year financial plan, and these are the levers that we see.
Okay.
So that happens to be another lever, adding it or not, is how I'm taking it.
And the idea that what are the services that can be operated by the agency over the 20-year period with our current revenue picture. And this exercise points to a gap that when it comes time to replace rail equipment, if we don't have more than 80% participation on fleet replacement, we're going to be in a challenged spot on our long-range financial picture. Mm-hmm.
And then the last slide here is, what does that look like? So if we take options 2, 3, and 4, we take those 2 capital projects out, what does that do to the long-range financial plan? Again, the black line here is option 1, if we just continue as is with the same assumptions. Option 2 through 4 is the green line. And so you can see through this green line, it stays positive through all 20 years, okay? Understanding that's if we pulled levers on the sales tax side, we pulled or pulled levers on the expenditure side, or pulled both of them together and had to pull a lever with the capital projects. And so I think the idea is to present to you guys what would it take for us to get there, understanding that some of these options may seem extreme. Some of these may seem, are we staying conservative or are we not? But we want to be able to present you options to say, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what the picture looks like. Here's some options that we could pull in order to solidify it, make it look better, and then seek your feedback as to what you want it, how you want us to proceed as an agency.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you because it's a lot of effort to try to figure out what does the rail look like when we don't really know what that's going to be in 20 years. So being able to create this box that at least as a thought exercise, I think is incredibly important. I think what I take away from this is that if we don't figure out ways to grow the entity, whether that's contract services, new members, whatever it is, as a board, we need to be really focused on how we grow the entity because we see where the status quo will get us. I think it also is great information when I'm having conversations with the RTC and we're talking about Vision 2.0. What does regional transit truly look like? We have what I consider a regional asset in the rail line, but only 3 cities are carrying the load for that. And so is there a conversation and what are the impacts of making these regional types of decisions? What are the impacts on the cities that are carrying that load of the other cities that are getting the benefit? And people will say, well, I'm not getting a benefit. Well, you are. Every car we take off the road lets your work truck get there faster, lets a semi truck move through faster, not just people. So as a board, I think this gives us a lot of clarity when we're having conversations about how we fit in the broader region and how we spend our money. So I appreciate it. And I want to give context to that because I know if I were looking at this without that context, it'd be like, well, we're just kind of playing some spreadsheet games. But that's, this is really about, what's our vision and our purpose as an agency and giving the board some clarity on those decisions that we make today, what they're going to impact us in 20 years.
I agree with everything TJ just said. I also just wanted to mention, like, my concern with option 2 is really, just as TJ had said before, we have no control over that. So really just trying to balance a long year financial plan or a long-term financial plan by saying, okay, well, we're just gonna say, we're gonna assume the sales tax is gonna go up. That doesn't change anything. There's no action along with that. That's really just let's hope it does and plan for it. I would rather plan for it not to, and then be able to add things back. So I really feel like option 3 we have to plan, what are we going to do if this financial picture doesn't change? We can't increase our income unless we go and recruit new members but I mean, I think that reducing the expenditures is a serious conversation that we need to have.
I applaud your model. I do this for my organization. So the question I would have is, at what point do we have to be ready to make a decision to reduce the capital expenditure? Is that a 2027 decision, a 2028 decision, or is it farther out?
No, to me, it's before you start any of those major projects, 27, 28 is when they all kind of start piling in there together, and so, I mean, there are some projects that are,
Sure.
say 30 out to 30, 33, and there's decisions. Those projects are, in my mind, are ones that are really driving the drop. If you understand what I'm saying.
So we may have to start making some decisions in the next year or 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With those projects that are sitting out there for
15
31, 32.
I want to thank the staff for putting in all their time and efforts. This is a work in progress, and I think everybody had different good feedback. But we do have to keep a close eye on the expenses, obviously, as we're looking at this. And the revenues are really out of our control, and that is a very dynamic revenue source, sales tax, and so we have to be very cautious about that. Yes, did you say?
No, I've got two quick comments. My apologies, Judge.
Right.
Number one, the debt load that we have, is that being recommended to us by our financial advisors, or where is that number coming from? Could we float more debt and run this out further? Are we trying to just be an all cash agency? I want to get a feel for that.
I'll take it. That is reflecting the assumption on the bond obligation for the A-train extension to downtown Carrollton.
Right.
We presented back in May. Let's assume we get a $25 million discretionary grant, then we have to borrow 25. The discretionary grant was not successful this time. We have to go back for that.
Mhm.
And so that is really what's driving it. We're trying to operate on an income basis.
Okay.
And so that is just related to that capital project.
I guess like my city, we spend, when I talk about roads, Cesar knows this better than I do. You look at that, but you're using your bond funding to be able to carry more, capital costs, those types of things. So you don't run on a pure cash basis. I think everybody would love to, but my question is have we explored, what is our carrying capacity that might make sense for these types of capital expenses over a long term? Are we finding that 1.6 million is really the optimal for us, or is it something else?
As Paul mentioned, that was built strictly on that 24.6 million. We have not done an analysis as what you're referring to. What we will do is go back and because we have visited with the financial advisor. What does it look like if we do finance that full $50 million? So we do have those numbers.
And I'm thinking more in the concept of how much in our portfolio of expenditures, how much bond funding can we support just as a number. I'm not looking at it as a per project. I'm just thinking about it as if we can support 1.6 million all the way through and we're doing fine, at a 5% rate or whatever that is. I worry if we're looking to do something on an all cash basis, we may be shortening some of our opportunities, some of our flexibility. And I also, this is infrastructure. So, if I can smooth that cost out over those bigger timeframes, does that make sense?
Where's our debt chart? I have two questions.
Let me get my last bit here.
Sure.
I like option 4 because it gives me the most flexibility. I'm not determined to be on one or the other, and I think there's enough gap unless Huffines decides to change that projection number. But 4 lets us at least kind of give a little bit more flexibility. Sorry, Dan.
We have some say in it, is what you're saying. Yeah, I hope so.
So my first question, the fact that we did not get that grant, did we get feedback on where our application was short?
We have not, but we will. We
Okay.
can start scheduling those debriefs, I think, in the next month or two, and we will go back and have a debrief.
And at what point do we make the decision, say we reapply and don't get it? Do you reapply and don't get it again? At what point do you say, okay, we're just gonna have to make a decision as to whether or not we're gonna fully fund this ourselves, or we're just not gonna do it?
We would bring that to you all to make that decision about how that project prioritizes amongst all the other things.
But internally, how many swings at the plate on the grant are you gonna take before you?
I would definitely give it at least one more, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to say you give it 2 more chances.
Okay.
But again, it's what is the driving force behind the project and the timing, and how aggressive do we want to be?
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to head to the podium for my part next, I think.
Okay.
But just the recap of what I heard is considering growth in sales tax revenue long term, we have to be very, very cautious on that. It may not reflect reality to say we're not going to put fleet replacement for the train in the long range financial plan, but we still have to find some way to reduce capital. And how do we look at the out years of where we had very little major capital expenditure and kind of balance all that out? So those are 3 things we can do to take another stab at this. Appreciate y'all's feedback on it. It is quite the exercise. So thank you. So I wanted to just come back up briefly to give you the perspective of the agency's work plan and what it is that we are going to be accomplishing in fiscal 27 as you all think about approving this budget. This is a graphic that has come up periodically over the last 4 years, just showing the kind of the arc and the story of the agency. Ridership is the blue line in the background, and the transformation initiative that took place in the late teens through the period of transition of leadership. And then in the last 4 years, we've been working off of that transformation initiative plan that the Accenture team had developed for us. And so we're getting really to the messages, we're really getting to the end of that effort, and it's time to begin thinking about what comes next. So this is a table that just lists all of those 30 items that Accenture said, this is what the agency should be focusing on over the course of the next 5 years in order to get itself in the right position to have a long run as an effective partner for our residents and member cities. So what you see is by the end of, or as of today, we finished 18 of 30 of those. Those are highlighted in green. We think that by the end of fiscal 27, we'll be at 75% complete. And the last 25% are really things focused on data analysis, customer experience, and items that I would say don't really have an end date, that are continuous improvement sorts of things. And so what we are working on right now is, what is our work plan going to look like for fiscal year 2027? And then beyond 2027, we really have to start focusing on what are we going to be doing in that next 5 to 10 year period. And I think it was said already, it's a challenge to think about long term because of so many things that are happening in the region. But I think it behooves us to do our best to do that. So certainly in the work plan for fiscal 27 will be the major projects that we listed here that are in the budget that you all are about to approve. And then the types of goals that we have shaping up for the agency. And again, as a performance-based agency, these goals drive down what the goals and objectives are for our entire executive team, which filter down into their direct reports and their direct reports and so on and so forth. So A-Train extension to downtown Carrollton, Old Town Louisville, TOD, we expect to continue to be making progress on those through design phases and getting ready for construction, always with the flexibility of revisiting if we need to, given the conversation that we just had. Continuing to look at our member cities and what are the ways that we can drive ridership and move as many people as we can as cost effectively as possible. Improving long-range financial plan outcomes. We will continue to do the exercises that we've spent the first part of this meeting on to make sure that we can be sustainable and focused. Continue to progress our data infrastructure, production, visualization. We've done some significant work on that in the last several years. We have more to go. Improving our DCTA customer experience across the trip cycle. That is bus improvements, that's customer service interface for all of our services coming through the DCTA organization. Maintaining our foothold in regional leadership through the Transit 2.0 initiative, both at the regional level and by maintaining our positive relationships with our member cities, our contracted services cities, and our county. And then the idea that this year we began working on what is our emerging vision. And the concept is what are we going to be working on in the next 5 years? Things like TOD planning at all of our stations. And we already have some conversations on the table with the city of Denton about that we're excited about. Thinking about who is our customer and how do those customers interact with us, from the trip planning, the trip booking, to showing up at the stop, to getting to their final destination. All sorts of things get born out of that from a marketing perspective, from an infrastructure investment perspective. And then as we look at the landscape of what are the needs for transit and public transportation in the region, it really revolves around what we see emerging with elderly and disabled populations and workforce transportation. You're going to see some of that in the briefing that Lisa gives here in just a minute. So nothing about this changes where we're headed. This is not going to be a major shift for DCTA to take from how we spend our time on a day-to-day basis, but it is the next iteration and what we would be delivering through the budget that you all approve. From the budget conversation last time, the org chart that'll take us there, overall staffing review, we continue to look at these, the roles and responsibilities to find the most effective ways to do things. And with that, here are our next steps. We anticipate bringing the operating capital budget back to you next month for public hearing and approval, if there's no objections to that. In the long-range financial plan discussion, that could be done next month, or it could be done separately, depending on how you all want to handle that. And then we'll be ready for October 1st. Any questions on anything that I presented?
That should be October 1st, 2026.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, correct. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Any other comments or questions related to that item? Okay. Hearing none, we'll proceed to item 2, which is discuss and consider authorizing the chief executive officer toward executing an agreement with Vector Media Holdings Incorporated for advertising revenue program services pursuant to a cooperative purchasing authorization from Dallas Area Rapid Transit. The contract number is C2071791-01. Good morning.
Good morning. Having the marketing guy come up after budget discussions.
It's well, we're happy to have you.
Again, name is Randy Evans, Marketing Communications Manager. Before I begin, so our recommendation, staff recommends the board authorize the CEO to award and execute an agreement with Vector Media Holdings Corporation for advertising revenue program services pursuant to cooperative purchasing authorization from Dallas Area Rapid Transit, contract number C2071791-0. Before I begin, I would like to thank the procurement department, specifically Justin Frost. He had a heavy lift in getting this across the finish line for us, so I really appreciate that. Just to give you a background, back in September of 2025, The board approved the advertising policy for DCTA. A couple items that you will not see in our advertising. No false, vulgar, obscene, disparaging, or contemptuous advertising. No advertising promoting tobacco or alcoholic beverages. And no advertising that creates a distraction or interference with the operation of the vehicles. Amongst other things, but these are the ones we did want to highlight and remind you guys of. DART competitively solicited and awarded Vector Media Holdings Corporation for revenue generating advertising and placement services in April of 2023. Staff felt that piggybacking on the DART contract was our best option. We feel like that had we gone to market ourselves, we would not have gotten some of the quality vendors such as a Vector Media to participate in our bid process. Just based on not having a background, this is something that DCTA is new at, and so there was no history of what those numbers could look like. So we felt this was the best option. DCTA authorized to piggyback off the DART contract, as previously mentioned. No separate procurement required. Just as a reminder, these are some of the advertising revenues, assets that we have that we will be attempting to sell. Bus stops, we have 32 DCTA owned. And of course, we have 4 on the UNT campus. Buses, 27, 16 cutaways. These numbers is not it excludes our new DART Gilligs and the Gilligs that are coming here soon. A trains, 11 total, 2 to 4 in service, depending on whether it's a weekday or weekend. And then all of our station signage, the platform signage, the pole banners that you see in the lots, as well as additional opportunities going forward that we may consider, such as our Go Zone fleet in the member cities. And as you can see, there's up to the left, there's a digital sign with the DCTA logo. That's actually on one of the new Gillig buses. And so those are assets that we would also sell. Again, the contract was awarded to Vector Media to cooperative purchasing via DART. It's a 2-year base with 5 one-year renewal options. And so it's a 7 years max. I will mention that DCTA has the opportunity to get out of the contract at any time with a 90-day notice. Revenue share, 60% of net advertising revenue to DCTA in the first 2 years, 65% in years 3 through 7. We do anticipate that those first 2 years, especially in year 1, there will be a ramp-up period. And then in year 2, we start to see our maximum output. Once the contract is signed, DCTA staff will meet with Vector. We'll sit down and do a complete overview of all of our assets and come up with what those projections look like. And then it will be DCTA staff that will hold them accountable and track their sales and what they continue to send us. So that will be an ongoing process throughout the 7-year contract. Upfront, this is the best line for a marketing guy. Upfront cost to DCTA is $0. This is turnkey. They handle everything from all advertising, sales, installation, maintenance, removal, and revenue operating. We also stress upfront that all of the fancy advertising that you put on these vehicles cannot get in the way of service, which no one wants Lisa mad at us. So marketing will not be the one to get in the way of having our vehicles in service, making revenue. So with that said, I'll stop back for any questions regarding the ad revenue contract. Here. Okay, so we do have some base level projections. Again, we will sit down and have a thorough look at the assets. But early on, year 1, revenue to DCTA, conservative numbers are expected 450,000 in year 1, ramping up to 570,000 in year 2. And then in year 3, when we move to 65%, we could look at 650,000. Projections currently over the 7-year period, you're looking at about $4.4 million in revenue.
And that's a great question, Chairman, and I want to underline the preliminary nature of the numbers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of details to be worked out, like to make sure that we comply with city ordinances when we put things on bus stops. You saw that in the list, there are UNT-owned bus shelters. They get to decide what gets done with those. We certainly want to give them the opportunity to participate with us and in our current partnership. And so lots of details to be worked out, but I think those are good order of magnitude directional numbers.
Super. All right.
Hearing no additional questions, staff recommends the board authorize the CEO to award and execute an agreement with Vector Media Holdings Corporation for advertising revenue program services pursuant to a cooperative purchasing authorization from Dallas Area Rapid Transit contract number C2071791-0.
Who wants to make a motion on us making some money, so it's spending some money? Okay, we have a motion. Thanks. So maybe it's okay. Right, Dan, any other comments? Well, I want to thank y'all for your good efforts on this, and it's exciting about this as an opportunity for us to realize some income in a thoughtful way. So I think that's great. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Good work.
And Mr. Chairman, before you go, we're going to take all three of these together. Because they
You want to open all those as
Yes,
one?
please.
All right, we're going to open up the next three agenda items as one discussion item, which is item number 3, discuss update on the DCTA contracted service portfolio. 4, discuss and consider approval of amendment number 2 to the current contract for EAN Holdings DBA Enterprise for the commuter van pool program. And 5, discuss and consider approval of a resolution approving budget revision 202607, increasing federal operating grants by $295,142. See, that goes our money. And purchased transportation by $295,142 to cover increased van pool demand. And the rate adjustments proposed in amendment number 2 to the agreement with EAN Holdings DBA Enterprise through September the 30th, 2026. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Staff recommends the board authorize the chief executive officer to award and execute agreement with I'm sorry. For agenda item number 4, staff recommends the board approval of the amendment 2 of the current contract with EAN Holdings doing business as Enterprise for commuter van pool. And for agenda item number 5, staff recommends board approval for a resolution approving budget revisions for 2026, number 7, increasing federal operating grants by $295,142 and purchase transportation by the same amount to cover increased van pool demand, and the rate adjustment proposed in amendment 2 to the agreement to EAN Holding doing business as Enterprise through September 3rd, 2026.
Can both of these be in one motion?
I think so.
I'll make a motion. We approve agenda item 4 and 5 together.
Okay, we have a motion to approve items 4 and 5. We have a second.
I'll second.
We have a second by Susie. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Perfect, thank you. All right. Number 6 is discuss update on the transit fare policy.
No, so we're gonna
go back.
go through a review of our contracted services
Oh,
on the
okay,
rest
go
of
ahead.
these discussions.
Oh, for all,
Go ahead.
back to item 3, okay?
And just to give an update on our portfolio, we'll start with the Frisco Paratransit. For that service, we operate 2 wheelchair accessible vehicles Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We use Lyft for any overflow demands, and there's also a Lyft program for a non-essential trip. So in June, if we look at the service provided between June and now for the same period of time, we've increased the active riders by 50%. We are currently providing service to them, and it's pretty consistent no real spikes. It's just a really consistent service. And we are doing that with the same KPIs that we are increasing the on-time performance. We're providing more service with better service. So the KPI is 90% for on-time performance, and we're doing about 99%. Frisco has a new Goes On service that started in May. But to date, we've done about 892 trips with 10% seat unavailability. That unavailability has been based on requests outside the operation hours and not within the zone, and not because we didn't have vehicles available. Currently, there's about 179 active riders. And the good thing about this service, majority of that rides are booked via the app and only 6 with an agent. Collin County Rides is our next service. We have 3 dedicated vehicles there also that run from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 2 of those vehicles are wheelchair accessible and 1 is ambulatory only. And Lyft also provides overflow service for Collin County Rides. We began this service in February 2024. The majority of the locations are either medical with reoccurring trips, employment or education. Again, this service runs very well, efficient. We're doing about 100% on-time performance, and we're doing about 3.4 passengers per hour, and that number continues to stay consistent. Capel is our first and last mile operation, and all this service is ran with Lyft. How it works, employers sign up with the city of Capel. They issue a code to the employees, and it operates 7 days a week from 4 a.m. to 12 a.m. The general ride is about $15 an hour. The rider pays $2, and then the city pays up to $15 for the ride. And in addition to that, Capel reimburses DCTA for all the services plus an administrative. We continue to implement our new member and contractor service policies. In 2026, the ILA for Collin County Rides continues moving them into the contractor service policy for DCTA. Collin County Ride has a current 1 year with a proposed 3 plus 2 year options. Frisco Elderly and Disabled and the Go Zone is in the 1 year with 2 years remaining with 2 options. Collin County does not participate in the working group. However, Go Zone, Frisco, and the Capel, they all participate in the transit working group. Collin County is grant funded, and we continue to seek those grants. And so is Frisco. Capel is paid completely by the city of Capel, so there's no grants applied for them. All right. Our next steps will be to complete ILAs and task orders for the board to approval. You will see those in the August board meeting. And these are the cities where we have ILAs are Allen, Fairview, and Capel. And then we'll have task orders for all of those. Keep going the wrong way. So our band pool is our next service to update you on. We started this service back in July of 2011 with DART and Trinity Metro. In March of 2022, DART pulled out of this service, so the area was split between DCTA and Trinity Metro. In May of 2022, we signed a contract with EAN Holdings Enterprise for a 3-year term contract with 3 one-year options It runs through May of 2028. Today, DCTA and Trinity Metro splits the service, and this is part of an amendment for number 2. It was approved. You can see we brought this because the van ridership is up like 37% over year, and there is an increase requested by Enterprise for the van rates. This will the increase brings us closer in line with the DCTA and Trinity Metro funding. This map shows where the van pool, the origins and destination, and as you can see, people are traveling throughout the region. Why this is important, we have people going all the way to Oklahoma in the service. So of course, fixed route wouldn't be able to cover this. So the van pool does allow us to continue to provide transportation throughout the region. So how does this funding work? The participants pay 49% of the cost to Enterprise. The surface transportation grant pays the 41% subsidy. So the COG authorizes this and does this with DCTA. DCTA pays the subsidy straight to to Enterprise, and then FTA reimburses FTA. There's no ILA with this, and this is a RTCA approved action. So right now, there is, $2.5 million in the grant funding, and we're paying approximately $80,000 a month. Currently, it's projected to have funds through April of 2028, but with the growth and the new contract rate, it goes to January 2028. So if we didn't do the amendment, the funds would take us to April, but with the amendment, it goes to January 2028.
And Lisa, if you go back just a second. Other way. Yeah, there you go. The important thing for the board to understand in this is we're 100% reimbursed on the service, no cost to DCTA. And we want to make sure that before we start another year of van pool service, that there's money available for us to be reimbursed. This graph is what tells us that by the end of fiscal 27, with the money that we have on the current path, which includes all the growth that we've seen, that we're safe in providing the service through fiscal 27. So that's the biggest takeaway from this conversation. And I think that and the map that shows the broad geography by which all these people are using the van pool service gives us a good illustration of transit demand in the region that we should be thinking about for our future. So thank you very much, Lisa.
So what is this? When do we reapply with was it administered through the RTC when we did that?
It is administered to the RTC, and it's an evergreen program, but we need to take this step to make sure that it's not going to be any gaps.
Yeah.
And so we don't expect the program to end when our contract with Enterprise will be ending in the next couple of years. We'll have to recompete that to be ready to take on the next level of funding from the RTC after that contract.
Okay. Yes.
How do cities get involved in the program?
It's not on a city's basis. It's individuals who want to do van pool. Enterprise does a pretty good marketing effort to make people aware of it in workplaces. They go through, and then the users go through the website to sign up.
I'm just thinking about all the growth in northern Denton County, and there used to be you could drive to Gainesville in 30 minutes. Now it's an hour drive to Gainesville, and you got 14,000 homes coming to Sanger. So how are we telling that story so people can work? I took a van pool in Washington, D.C. for 3 years, so Yeah, I know how it works. So they listen to Howard Stern the whole way there. I'm sorry.
So there's a lot of outreach and they are looking at some of the stuff with our marketing department where we have people, so they are able to reach out to those people to let them know.
Yes.
When Randy and I were in North Frisco, there was a lot of questions about Prosper taking part in some kind of thing like this. So might put some type of marketing in somebody's ear that there was some interest. Then again, Randy had water jugs, so it made him very popular anyway. So,
This was approved at the beginning, so. Yeah.
So we did a motion in a second. I don't think we voted on that, did we? Did we vote on that?
I think you took the action.
Did we take that? I thought we did a motion in a second. I was voted. Okay. All right. Next is item 6, discuss update on the fair transit policy. We had related to that.
A briefing on the fair policy. We're moving right along with this and development of the policy. You have at your place a copy of that draft. Our hope is that you will be able to review that, give us some continued feedback so that we can approve this by the end of the fiscal year. And so just a high level flyover on this. What it is, the fair policy, what it does, first of all, it sets the authority over fares. It sets the board's authority over fares, defines how decisions are made, and specifies the process required before any fare changes are take effect. What it does not do is it does not change any of the fares. It does not change what the riders paid. That is specifically in attachment B. The fare schedule, which is something that will be adopted separately. The document itself is 16 sections, has 3 attachments. I'm just going quickly over a few of the sections that are there that I want to bring your attention to. Section 3 talks about the what guides every decision, what guides the decisions that we make or you guys make as a board. First of all, governance and oversight. The board approves every change on the staff analysis. So if we have a change in fares, you all as a board will make those decisions. Equity and affordability. We have our low income senior, disability and student riders, financial sustainability. How do the fares support the budget? What are the recovery targets by the mode and are we on target with those? Consistency and transparency. Regional coordination, working with DART and Trinity Metro, and then practical and legal sense. Section 4, again, gives the board exclusive authority over fare schedule, new fare types, all fare changes, with approval to the CEO for any promotions up to 90 days, institutional passes, employer agreements, and then emergency fare suspension up to 30 days, which he then the CEO then would have to come back to the board for approval. Section 6 talks about our four fare structures and also fare capping. Riders cannot overpay, so it gives the board the opportunity to approve or award a fare capping at some point in the future. Same thing with loyalty and awards, the incentive program that would be there. And then it also spells out our free fare events and also those that receive free fares as well. Section 8, things that are required by the law, reduced fares, talks about the seniors 65 plus and riders with disability. It talks about what are we required as an agency to provide. And then give some discretionary to you as a board as far as you can go further and provide any kind of other discretionary discounts if you so choose. Section 8 also talks about the nonprofit pass program and the sponsored trip program. Sections 10 and 11 talk about really about the fare box recovery. It spells out what fare box recovery is, defines that, then talks about the measuring that and performance, and when we all, as the administration, will report that to the board, and what happens if we are not hitting those targets. And then section 12 talks about changing a fare. How does that happen? Who approves it, which is you all as a board, what all must happen in order for us to change a fare. Section 13 talks about enforcement of fares, talks about a graduated enforcement. What are the steps that are to take place? Section 14 talks about a regional coordination, again, with DART and Trinity Metro, and how that is all kind of spelled out. And so really what we're looking for is, again, more feedback from you guys, is what is in that draft policy. Does that draft really reflect your priorities, what you want to have in there, intents for fares? Is there a balance between the board and the day-to-day administration on the duties that are there? And then really, is there anything that is missing, anything that's unclear, anything that you would like to see added to that policy before we bring it back to you guys for approval? So our path forward is we kind of anticipate a final revision of this draft and a consent agenda item coming to you before the end of the fiscal year. And then after we get that approved, we'll move on to really the next step, which would be an evaluation of our fare schedule and any modifications that we would suggest or recommended on that. With that, is there any questions regarding the draft policy?
When do you need this feedback by?
By the next board meeting would be great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Give me a deadline and I'll do it.
I know, I just wrote it, I need to. I just wrote it down too.
Yeah, I want to underline the item
The
about.
world keeps spinning if we don't do it, but still.
The regional coordination piece is really important. We don't have the unilateral authority to say, here's the regional fare, nor does any other agency in the region. We have not to this point found a written policy that says how the regional fare is established. And so with this policy, then we have the license to go and cause those conversations to happen. And I'll commend Derek on this. I think if long range financial plan was his first assignment when he got here, his second assignment was a fare policy for public transportation. So he's done a great job.
Perfect. Very good. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's go to informational reports. Safety service ridership reports. Anything you want to highlight?
I will highlight there, Mr. Chair. You see on the KPIs for Go Zone that wait time, seat unavailability, we're maintaining the spread between the zones, but we're seeing increased demand in the Louisville zone specifically. And we have started to unleash some of that reserve capacity to continue to meet those KPIs. And in Denton, we're starting to see pushing against the ceiling of what we would like to see for wait time. And so this makes the intermediate service plan phase 3 conversation very timely, because that fixed route solution could be a relief valve for whatever that might look like in fiscal 27 and beyond. So thank you.
Okay. Anything on 2, 3, 4?
All the other, I can say all the others are item 2. The ERP implementation for our parts management was a goal from the transformation initiative that we got done. And so hats off to Lisa and Bobby Yard and the operations team. And items 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8 are all small maintenance type projects that fall within my signature authority, but that I wanted you all to be aware of. We're proceeding forward directly related to supporting operations. And the last one, item 5, is an MOU that we have had with Federal Emergency Management Association for quite some time. And that is coming up for renewal. If they ever need their employees out of the Denton Center to be transferred other places, they could call us to provide those bus services.
Of course. Okay. Members, are there any other future agenda items that y'all would like to add to future agendas? Okay. I would like to remind everybody that our next regular board meeting will be August the 27th. And then do we want to do we have an executive
We
session?
do have an executive session and lunch is available. So if you want a break, you can grab lunch and come in here. It'll go back.
Okay. All right, it is 11:35. We are going to take a break and then we do have lunch provided. If anyone wants to grab something, and we'll proceed into executive session. I'll go ahead and say our executive session item today will be pursuant to Texas Government Code 551, Section 551.0415. The Board of Directors may receive from staff and or make a report on the following items. Number one, expression of thanks, congratulations, condolences. Two, reports from about holiday schedules, recognition of individuals, reminders about upcoming DCTA and member city events, information about community events and announcements involving imminent threats, public health or safety. Thank God we don't have any of those today. Is there anyone wanted to say anything about anything related to that? All right, our executive session today is pursuant to Texas Government Code 551, Section 551.07, deliberation regarding real property. The Board of Directors will convene into closed executive session to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property located in one at the downtown Denton Transit Center and two within the city of Louisville, Texas. All right, it is 11:37 and we are in executive session. All right, it is 12:17. We have reconvened from executive session. There'll be no action today taken on items discussed in our executive session. Hearing no other items before the board, we are adjourned. Thank you.